Alex Eala begins another chapter in Philippine tennis history tonight as the Filipino star opens her 2026 Wimbledon campaign against a familiar opponent, Mexico's Renata Zarazua. Now, this is more than just a first-round match. It's a rematch nearly 2 years in the making. Back in 2024, Zarazua rallied from a set-down to defeat Eala in the quarterfinals of the W100 Carry Tennis Classic, handing the young Filipina one of her toughest losses.
Imagine booking a Wimbledon ticket only to realize your biggest competition isn't another tennis fan, but an entire nation that apparently woke up and chose the exact same travel plans. That is exactly what happened when Alex Eala turned the famous tournament into an unofficial Filipino family reunion. Somehow, a 21-year-old with a tennis racket managed to create airport traffic, panic ticket buyers, and leave Wimbledon organizers wondering whether center court had suddenly become far too small.
Complained.
You're meeting so many players, like Belinda, getting to practice with her. You've got the little, cool new folks club with you and Evilise and Alex Eala, and I saw Paula Bedosa taking a selfie with you the other day. Is the clique expanding? Are you adding people to the cool kids group?
Listen, everyone's welcome. This is not a clique. We're not drama. So no, everyone's who's sweet and wants to have a good time. Everyone's welcome, and I don't know. We're just, it's not too serious, honestly. Obviously, we're all competing on the court, but we want to have friends. We want to do stuff off the court. It's not like we know people in every city of the world that we travel.
The strangest revolutions in sports rarely announce themselves with fireworks or championship celebrations because they usually begin with something so ordinary that almost everyone overlooks it.
Alex Eala going to get things started here in round number 1 on Tuesday. So Eala, as you guys know, home country of the Philippines, always behind her, has a big backing, a big following, so much support, and great to see from her because I'll tell you what, she's definitely earned it with the body of work that we've seen out of her the last few years. Talk about a nice up-and-coming talent here within the sport. Does she have the big power game? No, but she moves well. She never says die at any point. She tracks down every ball, extends rallies left and right. I mean, she is just very talented within that return game to extend rallies. And I'll be honest, she actually surprised me here within the...
A routine rankings update appears on a phone, another tournament draw is released, or a relatively unknown player walks onto a court that seems far too small for the attention they are about to command.
My also initial reaction is Alex Eala has got to be you got to be happy with that first round, because for Alex Eala, think about some of these non-seeds that she could have played that I think would have been more difficult. I would say Kazatkina, as someone who has done well on grass in the past, would have been more difficult. Bianca Andreescu, a former Grand Slam winner and has already played 3 matches on grass in qualies this week coming through. I would say she would be more difficult. Perhaps.
Then, almost without warning, thousands of people begin moving in the same direction as though they all received an invitation that was never actually written. That is exactly how the remarkable rise of Alex Eala transformed from an inspiring tennis story into something much larger. Because by the time Wimbledon arrived in the summer of 2026, it was no longer just about a gifted young player climbing the rankings.
A win for Zarazua. If that came on the clay, then I think we can pretty much dismiss it. And also if it came a couple of years ago or more likely. It came on hard court, but it was 2 years ago, and it was in 3 sets. So the 1-0 head-to-head from that winning carry that the Mexican had, yeah. Maybe also Zarazua will get distracted by the World Cup ahead of this particular encounter, where Mexico, of course, are flying high.
It had become the story of an entire global community refusing to miss history as it unfolded in real time. Ironically, Wimbledon was never supposed to be where this story truly began. The roots stretch back several months to Melbourne, where a seemingly harmless scheduling decision quietly exposed how dramatically professional tennis had underestimated the influence of one 21-year-old athlete from Quezon City. Tournament organizers looked at the rankings, examined the opening round matchups, and assigned Alex Eala to Court 6, a cozy venue designed for early round contests that generally attracted modest crowds. Reality, however, had absolutely no intention of following the script. Hours before the first ball was struck, long queues began winding through Melbourne Park with astonishing speed. Fans arrived well before sunrise, believing they had left themselves plenty of time, only to discover hundreds of people already waiting ahead of them. The remarkable part was that the loudest cheers often came from supporters who never managed to enter the stadium at all, creating the surreal image of a tennis match whose atmosphere extended far beyond the boundaries of the court itself. For tournament officials, the scene created a problem they had never anticipated. The Australian Open had welcomed well over 100,000 spectators that day, setting a remarkable attendance figure. Yet an extraordinary percentage of those visitors seemed interested in following one player whose global popularity had quietly outgrown the assumptions built into professional tennis.
Straight off the press, we now know exactly which court Alex is going to play on Tuesday. So Tuesday the 30th of June, that's a couple of days' time, we will have camped overnight for tickets, and we will be in, and we will be courtside with our camera facing the play, and Dan will be there doing some commentary, whatever commentary he can possibly do in terms of not being thrown out for being too noisy.
Suddenly, the conversation inside the sport shifted from discussing Alex Eala's backhand or tactical development to asking a far more uncomfortable question. How had everyone underestimated the size of the audience she was bringing with her? One observation captured that confusion perfectly. Members of the tennis establishment openly questioned why such a match had been placed on such a small court, and the comments spread rapidly because it reflected what countless spectators were already thinking. The issue was never whether Alex deserved attention because of her ranking alone. Understanding that phenomenon requires looking beyond tennis courts altogether. Melbourne is home to a large Filipino community whose members have spent decades building lives thousands of miles from the country where they were born. They carried their culture with them, built families abroad, and slowly turned unfamiliar cities into homes without ever completely leaving their identity behind. When Alex Eala stepped onto the court wearing the Philippine flag beside her name, those communities immediately recognized something deeply personal in her journey. There was no expensive marketing campaign orchestrating this connection.
I know how the grass courts are going to work out for y'all in her game, right? But I'll tell you, it was a clean lead up to Wimbledon. I thought she did enough on grass to prove that she could definitely play on it, make some noise here a little bit. And with having that great support system, the confidence behind her, her ability to extend rallies and whatnot, I mean, you have to like her a lot within this early round matchup. I can't find anywhere where I could say, like, I don't know about Eala here. I like Eala's game a lot. I think she's having a very steady 2026. Now that she had that big splash like we saw last year where she made that Miami Open semifinal and beat Iga and pushed Pagula within that semifinal. No, but she's been making
No celebrity endorsements encouraged people to buy tickets, and no promotional strategy instructed overseas Filipinos to organize themselves into massive cheering sections. Everything happened naturally because recognition has a remarkable way of spreading without permission. One family invited another to watch a match. Friends began exchanging highlights through group chats, and communities that had spent years separated by oceans suddenly found themselves celebrating together because one young athlete reminded them that their stories still mattered on the world's biggest sporting stages. Despite their different professions and locations, many share the same quiet longing to see someone carrying their flag compete successfully on the global stage. Alex Eala unexpectedly became that person, and the speed with which people embraced her surprised even those who knew her best. As her victories accumulated, the support evolved into something that resembled a worldwide reunion. Nurses finishing exhausting overnight shifts stayed awake to catch late-night matches. Students squeezed viewing parties into tiny apartments. Families adjusted dinner schedules so everyone could gather around a television together, while workers watched live streams during lunch breaks whenever tournament schedules allowed.
But since then, both players have grown. Zarazua is now 28 years old, ranked world number 75 after climbing as high as number 51 last year. She owns 3 WTA 125 titles, has Grand Slam experience, and reached the second round of Wimbledon last year after a dominant opening round victory. She also battled through qualifying in Bad Homburg before falling to Wang Xinyu. Now, ironically, Eala and Zarazua also became doubles partners at the French Open.
Social media became flooded with celebrations after every victory, but the excitement never felt artificial because it reflected genuine emotional investment rather than manufactured online enthusiasm. Alex herself has always spoken about that relationship with remarkable sincerity. Rather than describing herself as an individual star carrying an entire nation, she consistently emphasized the collective pride that Filipinos feel whenever one of their own circuitous tournament organizers understand television ratings, sponsorship agreements, and ticket demand, yet Alex's popularity consistently exceeded every projection. Wherever she competed, familiar patterns emerged. Practice courts became unexpectedly crowded long before official matches even started. Fans waited patiently for hours just to watch routine training sessions that rarely attracted significant attention for most players. Volunteers and security personnel repeatedly discovered themselves managing crowds far larger than anyone had predicted. Indian Wells offered another striking example as hundreds of supporters wearing coordinated fan shirts lined up simply to watch Alex practice.
I want to be friends with the girls that I actually know and that are on the tour, and we want to do fun things outside the court. So I think that's what it's about.
I like that. Everyone can come to the lunch table.
Yeah, everyone's welcome, not a clique.
I feel like even the one thing that makes you maybe different is that when it comes to actually playing, like you barely lost games to Alex this year in those 2 matches. What makes you thrive in those situations against your best friends?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I actually played quite well both of the times that I played against her. I hear we're doing something at the Open a little.
Similar scenes unfolded in Dubai, where organizers openly acknowledged the incredible loyalty shown by Filipino supporters attending the tournament. Rome witnessed almost identical scenes, complete with waving flags, overflowing spectator areas, and an atmosphere that transformed ordinary practice sessions into celebrations. Each tournament initially believed the excitement might represent an isolated event, yet every new stop on the calendar produced the same astonishing outcome. Eventually, some tournament directors adapted by assigning Alex to larger courts before demand overwhelmed available seating. Others remained skeptical until they experienced the phenomenon themselves. Her performances had already been extraordinary because defeating elite opponents in consecutive matches requires not only exceptional talent, but also immense confidence under pressure. Victories over 2 of the world's very best players demonstrated that her rapid improvement was no temporary hot streak. She had earned her place among tennis's rising stars through fearless competition against established champions. Then another notification arrived, quietly delivering the detail that transformed an excellent week into a historic milestone.
You've won at Wimbledon 7 times, and you feel comfortable on grass. Half the draw is psyched out by this surface. The awkward bounces, they don't know how their game really should be played. Serena knows exactly what to do. The serve still looked amazing. She's going to serve that way when she's 60, 44 now. And the return, her timing still looks good. So she'll come in, she'll throw in once in a while a backhand slice, but her game is all about forward and first strike tennis. She's going to be feeling the nerves too. The first few games are going to be very...
A withdrawal higher in the rankings shifted Alex upward once again, moving her into the group of seeded players for Wimbledon. On paper, the adjustment involved only a single ranking position, yet its historical significance extended far beyond a simple number beside her name. For the first time in the Open era, a Filipino tennis player entered a Grand Slam tournament as a seeded competitor. That achievement represented far more than statistical recognition. A seed symbolizes belonging. It reflects the sport's official acknowledgement that a player has earned protection through consistent excellence and deserves to avoid facing the tournament's strongest opponents during the earliest rounds. After decades without a Filipino name appearing among Grand Slam seeds, Alex Eala had permanently rewritten that chapter of tennis history through determination, patience, and relentless improvement. Many of these supporters were not wealthy tourists making spontaneous vacation plans. They were ordinary people making extraordinary financial commitments because they believed witnessing this historic moment justified every sacrifice required to be there. A nurse working repeated double shifts viewed the expense as worthwhile.
Alex lost to in the first round of a Grand Slam at the beginning of the year in Australia. Qinwen Zheng, if she's fit, would definitely be a trickier opponent. Barbora Krejcikova, the person that knocked Eala out in the first round last year would also be a more tricky opponent for sure. I think big hitting players such as Panu Udvardi as well, someone who has beaten Alex, albeit on the clay in the past. Tomljanovic as well. There's still a very good player in there. She's obviously had a lot of health issues over the last couple of years. Maybe even Serena Williams would be more difficult in terms of the occasion and something that Alex might find.
A caregiver rearranged precious vacation days that had taken years to accumulate. Seafarers coordinated complicated schedules around shore leave, while students carefully balanced limited budgets in hopes of witnessing history firsthand. Every ticket purchased reflected far more than entertainment because it represented faith placed in someone who had inspired an entire community long before she reached the world's biggest stages. As Wimbledon approached, another fascinating discussion emerged throughout the tennis world. Analysts stopped asking whether Alex Eala possessed remarkable talent because that answer had become obvious. Instead, they began debating whether she had quietly become one of the sport's biggest attractions, regardless of ranking. Even established champions understood that her popularity operated according to completely different rules, shaped less by trophies than by genuine emotional connection. The evidence extended well beyond packed stadiums. Digital engagement surrounding Alex consistently shattered expectations, with interviews and press conferences attracting astonishing audiences that often exceeded those of far higher-ranked players.
And we will try and bring the scoreboard with us. But anyway, you will get live footage from us of Alex versus Zarazua on court 12. They are the third match on. Now, that means they'll probably be, they start at 11 on the outside courts, so there will probably be 2:30. We'll keep you up to date in the posts. But whatever you do, pop a subscribe so that you can keep the up-to-date updates coming, and we will see you right there in Wimbledon with the flag. The Filipino
Tennis executives suddenly faced data that challenged long-held assumptions about what truly drives interest in the sport, and the realization forced many to reconsider how they viewed emerging stars in an increasingly global game. Perhaps the most refreshing aspect of Alex's remarkable rise was that she never appeared interested in manufacturing celebrities. She spoke with the humility of someone who still viewed herself primarily as a tennis player, focused on improving rather than an international phenomenon carefully cultivating an image. That authenticity became one of her greatest strengths because supporters sensed they were watching someone whose priorities had never changed despite rapidly growing fame. The louder the support became, the more confident she appeared to carry onto the court, and the more victories she earned, the more determined her supporters became to travel wherever the tour would take her next. It was a feedback loop powered entirely by belief rather than advertising, and it continued growing with every passing month until it became impossible for tournament directors, broadcasters, and even fellow players to ignore. Tennis has always celebrated individual excellence, yet Alex's rise demonstrated that an athlete can also become the heartbeat of an entire community without ever trying to manufacture that role.
That's how I said. Most people wouldn't be able to handle the 4-year break.
Yeah.
I think Serena will be able to. We'll see, though.
Well, you mentioned the intimidation of the draw. So let's take a look at her potential week 1 matchups, because it could get quite enticing if she's able to get through this first round.
Yeah, so Maya joined from Australia. I believe that Serena will get through that. And then I would suspect that it's going to be Alexandra Eala, the lefty from the Philippines, who just won a 125 on grass. So she's got 12 matches already under her belt this season. She also beat Rybakina. She beat Svitolina.
As Wimbledon prepared to welcome the world's finest players, organizers quietly remembered the lessons learned in Melbourne. Nobody wanted to repeat the mistake of placing one of the tournament's biggest attractions on a court that could not possibly contain the audience eager to watch her compete. The concern was no longer based solely on rankings, because everyone involved understood that Alex carried something much larger than a seed beside her name. She carried generations of hope, countless family sacrifices, and the dreams of millions of Filipinos who had spent years building lives far from home while waiting for a sporting moment that truly belonged to them. They would echo through every group chat that had stayed awake into the early hours of the morning, and every household that proudly displayed the Philippine flag while watching a match unfold thousands of miles away. By the time Alex stepped onto the famous grass courts, she was no longer carrying only a tennis racket. She was carrying the hopes of a global community that had already decided this remarkable journey belonged to all of them, and that shared belief made Wimbledon feel less like the next stop on the calendar and more like the beginning of an unforgettable chapter that the entire tennis world was finally ready to witness.